When,
Okay, you're all set.
well, as we all transition to online teaching, I'm here to talk about online discussion forums. And I teach a number of courses in philosophy here at Poly, and I've been teaching online ever since ASU started offering online courses over a decade ago. Most of my experience has been on the Blackboard platform, but the principles and strategies are very similar. And I'm not quite as familiar with all the features of Canvas, but so far I'm finding that the same general principles apply. And although I teach philosophy courses, I think the same or similar principles and strategies can be generalized to most other disciplines. So why discussion forums? These are some of the reasons why I think discussion forums are so valuable in the online setting. First of all, community. I encourage faculty to use discussion forums because it creates a sense of community for the students. It's a virtual meeting place where students can be social, realize that they're not alone in the class. They can ask questions of each other, express themselves, actively learn, and by doing so, enhance their academic experience. So building a sense of community is important for the students. They feel more connected to the course, the instructor, and their peers. In all my online courses, in the very first module, I have one discussion forum that's similar to a student lounge, where students can be friendly towards each other, meet one another, discuss similar academic interests, meet other students who are, for example, in the military, and so on. And they learn at the very beginning of the course that there are many interesting people with different perspectives and different backgrounds in the class. And this engages the student from the very start. When I first started creating online discussion forums, I wanted to emulate as closely as possible the in-class experience. So in philosophy, it's important for students to think through the issues for themselves and to engage with each other, particularly if they have differing viewpoints. The act of grappling with the issues and the concepts, that promotes active learning, and it helps make the concepts come alive, so to speak. So I want to make sure all of those same aspects of the classroom learning experience are emphasized in the online course. So conversations with other students, whether synchronously or asynchronously, is an important and dynamic aspect of learning philosophy. And discussion forums play an important role in this respect. It's also a positive social platform and enhances social connection. While they are engaged in grappling with the questions of philosophy, it's also a way for students to feel connected to each other. In an age of social or physical distancing that we're going through now, this feeling of connection is important. They are acknowledging each other, often encouraging and complimenting one another's insights. And I find this very gratifying. Students who experience pleasant emotions with respect to the learning experience are generally motivated to learn more and are more likely to retain what they've learned. Another reason why I think the discussion forums are wonderful is that they increase student participation. Some students don't like to talk in class or to participate. They're shy or introverted, intimidated, they fear disapproval, and so on. And then there are the other students who love to hear themselves talk. So the discussion forum is a wonderful medium for moderating those extremes. In the online environment, I found that the participation rate online is much higher than in the classroom, particularly if the in-class course is large. So this is a great way to get more students involved in their own learning. There are many ways to structure the discussion forums, and I would encourage you to experiment and be creative. The best kinds of forums for your students will depend upon what you hope to accomplish in your particular case and what you intend for your students to learn. So I'm just going to give you an example of what I've been using. I've basically been using 3 different forms. I currently use all of them, or at least one of them in all of my courses. And so I'll just list them first and then talk about them. One is an issues forum, second one is a readings forum, and third one is Pearls of Wisdom forum. So for the first one, the issues forum, that features a case study. I try to pick interesting, relevant, engaging, sometimes provocative, real-life situations in order to motivate and engage my students. Or sometimes I use an interesting thought experiment that illustrates a particular point from the readings. So I try to choose cases that are both learning opportunities and relevant to the daily lives of students. Also, case studies and thought experiments are ways to bring the discussion down to a pragmatic level. When students see a relevant application of a theory, they're more likely to understand it better, to engage in the practice of theory application, and in this way, to learn more about the theory itself. I think this kind of engagement helps students to realize that academics is readily applicable to real life. So for the issues forum, each student is required to post one response to a question that I ask about the case study or thought experiment. The second type that I use is the readings forum, which is a question and response type forum. I allow the students to pick their own questions. They choose what's interesting to them and to ask a question about that issue. So for that post, they're required to formulate a question about an issue within the assigned readings for that particular module. And the way I conceptualize it, this activity is similar to asking a question in class. It's not an essay, it's not a writing exercise. It's a way to begin the process of thinking about more deeply an issue in philosophy. So I ask them to be concise, to organize their thoughts in a way that can be communicated clearly in about 2 paragraphs. In the same forum, I also require students to respond to another student's question. Again, they may choose from any of the questions that have been posted. In this way, you get an interesting back and forth between students. Also, I will post a question to each of the readings forum. In case you have a student who wants to complete the assignment early, so they can do so without waiting for another student to post a question. This also gives them a template to follow when creating their own question, particularly when it's their very first time. It helps for them to see an example of what's expected as a post. The third kind of forum I use is probably my favorite. I call it the Pearls of Wisdom forum. And this is for my Philosophy of Happiness course. And here I ask students to choose a quotation from the readings. Then they cite the quotation, paraphrase it, and then analyze it. And then also they're required to respond to a pearl from another student by providing feedback or comments. And I love reading these interactions. Most of the time it's very positive, very encouraging. And the quality of their insights, it's very worthwhile reading. And some of it is really fascinating revelations. Many students provide examples from their own lives. And when they share a part of themselves during an academic exercise, it really humanizes the course. It adds a different kind of depth, a different dimension, and it touches everyone in the class on many different levels. So I thought I would just give you an example of an issues forum that I give to my students. And here, the objective is to have students synthesize what they've learned throughout the semester in the Philosophy of Happiness course. So this is an issues forum, and I call it Philosophy of Life. And it's I have in it 3 paragraphs, a quotation from The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. So this is the quotation. Sometimes when I meet old friends, it reminds me how quickly time passes. And it makes me wonder if we've utilized our time properly or not. Proper utilization of time is so important. While we have this body, and especially this amazing human brain, I think every minute is something precious. Our day-to-day existence is very much alive with hope, although there is no guarantee of our future. There is no guarantee that tomorrow at this time we will be here. But still, we are working for that purely on the basis of hope. So we need to make the best use of our time. I believe that the proper utilization of time is this: if you can, serve other people, other sentient beings. If not, at least refrain from harming them. I think that this is the whole basis of my philosophy. So let us reflect on what is truly of value in life, what gives meaning to our lives, and set our priorities on the basis of that. The purpose of our life needs to be positive. We weren't born with the purpose of causing trouble, harming others. For our life to be of value, I think we must develop basic good human qualities: warmth, kindness, compassion. Then our life becomes meaningful and more peaceful, happier. So these are the instructions that I give to the students. Reflect on the paragraphs above. The Dalai Lama encapsulates his life philosophy in a few words. It is helpful to have a concise reminder of the most important values in our own lives. It serves as a useful reminder that keeps us on track when we become distracted. Please complete the sentence. I believe that the proper utilization of time is this. Then, in one paragraph, provide an explanation or summary of what is of most value in life to you. The Dalai Lama's brief statement above is 112 words, so please try to keep your post under 200 words. In this type of getting to the essentials exercise, less is more. And then I always close with when the post is due. And this is one of my favorite assignments to read for my students. It always inspires me, often makes me smile, and I hope that students experience the same as they read the thoughts of their peers. So in the next section, I'd like to talk about the rules of netiquette. Since students are interacting with each other, I think it's important to state what the behavioral boundaries should be for your forums. For example, I expect students to be respectful, to be kind, to be open-minded. In my experience, 99% of my students are wonderful. I've only had about 3 hostile or aggressive students, and in one case, I asked the dean of students to intervene. But that really was the exception. I rarely have students who are disorderly or disruptive. But I think it's a good idea to articulate what is expected and what's not permitted. I have a document that's required reading, laying out the expectations for the creation of posts with respect to what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. And I think that helps to maintain a professional, harmonious academic environment. And it helps to ensure that their online experience is productive and enjoyable. So here's some examples of the netiquette standards that I use. I remind them that we're no longer face-to-face, so we can't see the nonverbal cues that often help to make the other person's meaning clear. So therefore, I ask them not to use sarcasm. Some students will not be able to discern the use of sarcasm, and the goal here is to reduce the possibility of misunderstandings. Another thing, I also emphasize the need for a respectful and congenial tone. Since forums are online versions of a classroom discussion, the post should be acceptable in a classroom environment. I asked them not to use all upper class, and that's tantamount to shouting, and that's unnecessary. Also, I remind my students to reread their posts before submitting, to check for clarity, comprehensibility, appropriateness. And I also make very clear that I reserve the right to remove an unacceptable or inappropriate post, and that I can privately connect to the student or engage in more serious disciplinary action if necessary. So they know before that I will be proactive about this. Another thing I like to remind them is to be charitable. When responding to the post of another student, they should make the effort to understand that student's claims or arguments. In particular, when discussing ethics, we sometimes engage in emotionally charged issues. So a student should interpret this kind of provocative post by being charitable and open-minded. When they're confronted with an opinion or an interpretation they find upsetting, I ask them to allow some time to pass before responding. In such cases, I suggest that it may be more constructive to ask questions about clarification rather than to react too strongly or too emotionally. And lastly, I always encourage them to be respectful, to be considerate, to be generous, and if possible, be kind, particularly in these challenging times. So I'd like to stop here. I hope some of these ideas will help you think about how you would like to implement the discussion forums in your class. And as I said previously, I hope you try things out and experiment. Find out what works for your particular style of teaching and consider what you want your students to learn from each discussion forum. My suggestion would be to create the kinds of forums that you find exciting and engaging for yourself personally. And most of the time, students do respond to that. In general, I think that discussion forums are wonderful tools to help students expand and deepen their knowledge, practice engaging with new concepts and ideas, learn to apply academic knowledge, and at the same time, create a sense of community and connection. And I guess, Nick, I'll turn this back to you.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions or anything?
I actually have one. I'm trying to engage students in more back and forth communication between them.
Yes.
And I try to tell them, I tell them, reply, so that's a requirement, reply to 2 other posts. And then if the other students ask you a question, please answer the question so that there's that back and forth. But I don't think I don't know if they're not comfortable with it or if they're not even following the comments that I posted on their own entries. I don't know how to get that going. What is your experience on that? I mean, I would love to engage more, but.
Well, my experience has been that they love the interaction. That's one of the favorite parts because they learn so much from each other. How are you setting that up in the text of the description of the forum?
I mean, I have a large file as a prompt, so they read that, and sometimes they go out and read other news articles and things, and then I ask them questions. Okay, reflect on this, and so that's one of the discussion boards. The other one is analyzing one of the favorite foods, and then I tell them, okay, so comment on one, and I ask them to, for example, sort the ingredients based on what kind of benefits they have or not. And I ask them to give the other students suggestions if they know another food that might be better for their health. So I'm just trying to, again, get them all engaged. And some do ask questions, and then I don't see any replies. So I mean, it's not required for grade, the replies to the
Oh,
comments.
it's not required.
I mean, the first comment is required, but answering the questions from the students for the comments is not required, because I don't have a way of tracking and grading, because on the comments view, on the grading part of the Canvas, when I look at the comment, I don't know which original post it was written for.
Oh, because you're looking at SpeedGrader?
SpeedGrader. And then if I go to the comment section, then I cannot enter a grade. So I have to switch between two different interfaces in Canvas to do that. And with 170 students, it becomes a nightmare. I mean, I
That is a
cannot
nightmare.
deal with that. In a small class setting, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this technical issue is stopping me from doing this in a more interactive way. I don't know how I can set that up.
I'm sorry, I have a similar problem getting students to respond to questions that other students will make on their posts. So I'm not sure, like, are they getting these as messages when people respond to their prompt in their inbox, or how do they learn that someone has responded to their post?
Yeah, I think they just receive a notification, right? That there's another post in that course. But so, are you looking for, so you have one student asking a question, and then there's a reply to the question. Do you want that first student to reply to the reply?
Yes.
Or to the,
Oh.
in my case, any question that is asked, either from the original post or from the comments. I would like that conversation going, but I don't know how to encourage that.
Yeah. What has worked for me is that I just have students reply to the question. That's the requirement. So I have 5 points for the question and 5 points for a reply. And then sometimes students will actually continue the conversation because they find it interesting. But I think that would certainly make it much harder to track in terms of grading. And I don't know if you want to do that to yourself. There's another thing that you can do is to break them out into separate groups. So when you're grading, you would be grading a smaller module. I'm sorry, a smaller group, right? In speed, I think that's how it would work. I haven't had to do that because my classes are small, 30 to 40 students. So that's all one group to me. But yeah, if you have 170, if you put maybe 60 or so in one group, that might be easier.
Yeah, that's one.
And I don't know if you really want to track a student response.
Yeah, and then at the end of the semester, when I don't have these discussion boards, they tell me, make it a requirement for us to talk back and forth. So they want to interact, but unless it's a requirement, I think
Exactly.
a lot of students don't feel comfortable doing it.
Yes.
So I need to put that requirement in there, but then it makes it a horrible grading experience for me because I can't keep track of who's talking to whom and who's responding.
And well, what I've been doing is I've been basically reading all the posts in the threads, right? Not through SpeedReader.
Okay.
And then I mark the problem ones so that I can get back to them. And then I go, and then so I know that all of the ones that I've read are fine, except for that small group that I need to get back to. And then through SpeedGrader, I just go very quickly through all of them and then stop on the ones that I have listed out. I don't know if that would help you at all.
Yeah. So are you grading their comments?
I give them, okay, so this, again, I'm conceptualizing my discussion forums just like a classroom session. So if it's like they're raising their hands in class, and I don't grade
The con-
participation in class, but what I do is I give them credit for their effort.
okay.
So unless, if they don't meet the bare minimums, or if their post is just way off, I always allow them to resubmit, and I tell them why they can resubmit. I give them comments for resubmitting. But what I do is basically it's credit or no credit. So if it's a C minus to an A, then they get the full credit. Let's say 10 points. If they don't, then those are the problems that I keep to the side and I let them know.
Okay.
So generally I don't, and I can read fairly quickly and I know exactly what I'm looking for. So it doesn't take me that long.
Yeah. So maybe I'll change it to that is just a comment and not look for course content in the comments, but that they just interact and talk, and that might make it easier. Yeah, I'll need to think more about that.
Yeah, I do look for content. I make sure that they're on track in terms of how they're understanding the materials. But I'm not, as long as they have an average understanding of the materials, they'll get full credit.
Oh yeah, do you comment on every single person's discussion post? I'm just curious, since you have
on the speed grader, yes, because I tell them what points I deducted for what reason, but I don't make that. I used to, but my course got bigger and bigger, so I used to comment on both the discussion board itself, and then I would give them grading comments on the speed grader or in Blackboard on the grading center. But I stopped doing the common comments on the general discussion board because I don't know if students are going in there and reading them. And with large class, that took a lot of time, so I gave up on that part. So I'm kind of cutting down on the things that I think are important, but again, it's a challenge of having a very large class, I think.
Yeah, at the very beginning, I used to do that too. I was commenting inside the discussion forum.
Yeah.
And I learned very early that that doesn't help.
No, and yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I am not sure if they're going back and reading it. So I'm putting all that time and effort into making individual comments. And if nobody's reading it, then I'm just wasting my time basically. So I don't know.
Yes, well, you know what I've done since then is I always have on my announcements, I have weekly announcements to my students. And I tell them if they want feedback for their posts or their exams or anything about the materials, then email me. And I found that worked really well because the motivated students, they want to know how to improve their posts. And so they'll send me their posts and I'll email back the comments, detailed comments. So for me, that's worked fairly well.
Yeah, that's good. I eventually ended up picking up the major points from all the students, and then after I graded all the assignments, all the posts, I would send them a general announcement to the course and kind of summarizing all my take-home messages from them and giving them some feedback, but that generalized for the whole class. So that was my solution for, instead of giving individual feedback, to do a general class-wide comment. So I don't know if that's the best approach or not. But.
You know, it really depends on your class.
Yeah.
For me, it's sort of worked, and I usually have over 200 students a semester. But there are some students are just fine with just points, and there's a smaller subset that want the feedback.
Yeah.
And generally it's not too many. So yeah, it's been workable.
How about you, Lynn? Do you do comments? Do you do discussion boards?
I do. I am like you. I have students respond to the prompt and then have them respond to two other students' discussion board posts. But then I find, like you noted, that I'm not getting that back and forth between students, even when they ask questions in their responses. I'm seeing that that's why I'm wondering how they get notified of them,
Yeah.
and do they, like, I don't want to put a grade on whether they're getting this back and forth, because some comments don't warrant like more discussion, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm kind of struggling with that, getting that discussion going
Exactly.
between students.
And I haven't figured out a solution, so that's challenging.
That is challenging. Yeah. Lynn, are all those posts required?
Yeah, I do require them to respond to the prompt and then respond to two others. And I break up the grades kind of like you do. They get half their grade comes from the discussion board post, and then half of their grade comes from the responses to the students' original post. I find that Canvas is much more user-friendly than Blackboard
Yeah.
at allowing me to track student comments, because it's nice in the speed grader, it'll bring up the student's original post and then bring up their responses to their classmates. And I'm not dealing anywhere near with 170 students. My classes are smaller at 25 to 30 students.
Uh-huh.
But do you know which original post they are commenting on? Because that's the problem I have. I don't know who they are responding to. So the content of their comments, I don't know if that's relevant or not, because I can't see the original comment in the speed grader view.
Yeah, something I have them do is just in their response is respond to the person's name. But if you like say, hey, Ella, you had a great post about whatever. That's how, because my classes are small enough so I can go kind of by first name, and so many students have unique names these days.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you do it in a class of 170 though.
Yeah, no, I tried it one time and I said never again. Yeah. I can't handle it. It's too much. Yeah.
So with such a large class, have you looked into Yellow Dig by chance?
No, I heard about it, but never got to look around yet.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's something you might want to look into. It's for kind of the discussion posts and that sort of thing, but it I think is a little bit easier to track responses, easier than Canvas, I should say. And it does have some automatic kind of grading to it, depending on how you feel about that. Most of it just counts word count, and it can't really check content. But it might be something to look at. At least organizes it differently in a way that's a little bit easier to see.
So do we have access to that? I mean, I thought that was specifically for all courses from online.
So ASU Online has it in their account. UTO is actually, so they opened it up last year for the whole university.
Oh, okay.
And UTO's been paying that license for the last year. And now we're in the process of renegotiating for the next academic year. So I know that CISA is talking about getting licenses for that. But nothing specifically has been decided yet. But it's definitely something to look into.
Okay, I'll do that definitely. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions or anything? Any challenges besides discussion boards? No? Sweet.
Can you talk more about Yellow Dig?
I am not super familiar with it. Other than I know a few of our courses that are large and are in the IO kind of split. because ASU Online funds all of their courses and heavily encourages the use of it. But other than that, I just know it's discussion. It's for discussions and sort of student engagement. And the discussion posts look a little bit more like maybe like Facebook, where that's, there's like sort of that original post and then people can comment on it. And you can like posts and stuff like that, but it's a little bit more engaging in the way that Canvas can't quite be. But other than that, I've not particularly used it. I know that we do have some instructors who are using it. So if you are interested in that, I know one of the instructors in particular who gave one of these talks on Monday has encouraged faculty to reach out if they have questions about their experience using Yellow Dig. So I'm happy to reach out and make connections if you guys are interested in learning more about Yellow Dig.
I would definitely like that. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I'll send them an email as soon as we're done here and get you guys connected.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, anything else? All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I guess we can end there. Thank you so much, Elaine. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you. I want to take your course now. After
Oh, you sweet.
Maybe if I get a chance, I'll do that.